It begins strangely, not with glamour, but with irony. Diane Lane became famous for portraying the loyal wife betrayed by infidelity, yet in her own life, she once confessed to having crossed that line herself. The contradiction made her both fascinating and unsettling in the eyes of Hollywood. She was a girl who ran away at 15 with a boy, yet spent decades trapped in the image of a proper woman. She was Francis Ford Coppola's muse, Laurence Olivier's chosen prodigy, hailed as America's new Grace Kelly, and still, after 4 decades of dedication, she never once walked home with a major award. Diane Lane is one of Hollywood's most vivid paradoxes, a child who practically grew up inside her father's broken taxi, a 13-year-old girl who left the legendary Laurence Olivier speechless on set, a prodigy who graced the cover of Time magazine only to vanish so completely that critics assumed she had burned out before she had even begun. And then, without warning, she returned, not with a blockbuster, but with a single minute of silent performance that changed the way the world remembered her. For Diane, that has always been her truest gift, touching others' emotions without a word. But behind that gentle, unforgettable gaze lived an untold storm, 2 failed marriages, 1 shocking arrest, a confession of infidelity that left Hollywood stunned, and a private life so carefully guarded that people sometimes forgot she was even still here, living, mothering, enduring. This is the journey of Diane Lane, a woman who walked through fame, stumbled through mistakes, yet somehow never lost her essence in a world that devours innocence. If you've ever paused at the sight of her eyes lingering in a single frame, this is the story you've been waiting to hear. Diane Lane was born January 26, 1965, in New York City, into a family fractured before she could even recognize what family meant. Her mother, Colleen Farrington, was a nightclub singer and model, once even a Playboy centerfold in 1957. Her father, Burton Lane, was an acting coach who lived deeply in the world of off-Broadway theater, co-running workshops with acclaimed director John Cassavetes. But when life demanded bills to be paid, Burton drove a taxi, and so little Diane's childhood was shaped less by security and more by a steering wheel, a moving city, and a man who lived in between art and survival. Her parents separated when she was only 13 days old. 13 days, that was all it took for Diane's sense of home to dissolve into uncertainty. Her mother initially won custody, but when Diane was 6, Colleen left, moving to Mexico and later giving up parental rights. From then on, Diane remained with her father, constantly on the move, residential hotels, borrowed rooms, and the back seat of his taxi becoming the closest thing to a bedroom. She had no fixed address, no steady school, no real sense of belonging. Instead, she listened to her father speak endlessly of art, philosophy, and theater. It was an education of sorts, rich in ideals, poor in stability. Burton could recite Dostoevsky, but forget to cook dinner. He could speak of stagecraft, but fail to pay rent. Diane adored him, but she also grew weary of the constant upheaval. That restless, rootless childhood carved something deep inside her, the instinct to observe instead of speak, to distrust the idea of stability, and to carry her own boundaries like armor. By 15, she made the boldest decision of her young life. She left him. For 1 week, she flew to Los Angeles with co-star Christopher Atkins, an act she later described as reckless freedom. Too much, too soon. Returning to New York, she finished school on her own, paying rent, piecing together independence in a world that had never promised her safety. And then, in 1981, came the betrayal that cut her deeper than any headline ever would. Her estranged mother reappeared out of nowhere, and without consent, whisked Diane away to Georgia. To Diane, it felt like abduction, a decision made for her, not with her. For 6 long weeks, she lived with her grandmother, a Pentecostal preacher, in a world of canned meats, quiet prayers, and stillness. When her father sued and finally won her return, Diane had already decided she would not forgive her mother for 3 years. The damage was done. Yet, ironically, that unwanted exile gave Diane something she didn't yet know she needed: stillness. After years of chaos in New York's taxis and hotels, Georgia taught her the rhythm of simplicity. Repairing lawnmowers, eating plain food, and living without a stage prepared her spirit for what would come later in Hollywood. The girl who had learned that no one will protect you if you don't protect yourself was about to step into a spotlight that could consume her. When Diane Lane first set foot on a film set, she was just 13 years old, a girl with no formal training, no Hollywood connections, no carefully laid out plan. Yet within months, her name would echo across the industry as if destiny itself had been waiting for her. The year was 1979, and the film was A Little Romance. Her co-star? None other than Laurence Olivier, one of the greatest actors the world had ever seen. Many thought the wide-eyed New York teenager would fade into the background next to such a towering figure. Instead, Diane held her ground with a presence so natural, so instinctive, that even Olivier himself paused in awe. I had never done a film before, Diane later recalled, but George Roy Hill, the director, saw something in me. He didn't choose me because of a polished audition. He chose me by instinct, and I couldn't even understand why. That instinct changed her life forever. On set, she was tested immediately. George Roy Hill pushed her to go deeper. Today, he told her during rehearsals in Malibu, "You're going to cry for real. No tricks, no pretending. It has to be true." For a girl barely entering her teens, the demand could have been crushing. But when the camera rolled, Diane delivered something no one expected: raw tears, authentic pain, a fragile beauty that didn't feel performed, but lived. Even Olivier, the knighted actor of stage and screen, was disarmed. He didn't treat her like a child, but like a peer. He told her to call him Larry, not Sir Lawrence. He cracked jokes about the royal family to break down the walls of intimidation, and one day he gave her a compliment that would stay with her forever. "You are the new Grace Kelly." For Diane, it wasn't just the praise of a legend. It was the warmth of a man who gave her permission to believe she belonged. The film was released, and almost overnight, Diane Lane became a name that carried promise. Time magazine placed her on the cover under the bold headline, "Hollywood's Whiz Kids." Critics called her a fresh breeze in an era hungry for authenticity. And yet, Diane herself felt almost bewildered by the sudden whirlwind. "I didn't even realize what was happening," she admitted years later. "Looking back, I think that was the end of my childhood. I walked onto that set a little girl, and I walked off different." But the glow of fame is never without shadow. Success at such a young age meant Diane had to grow up faster than she wanted. Within just a few years, she was Coppola's muse in The Outsiders, Rumblefish, and The Cotton Club. At 18, she was already a millionaire. The spotlight adored her, but it was also merciless. By the time most teenagers were worrying about exams and high school dances, Diane Lane was already being dissected by the press. Every glance, every scene, every co-star was turned into a headline. She was still just a girl, but on screen, her chemistry with male leads, Matt Dillon, Michael Paré, Richard Gere, was so convincing that audiences couldn't separate Diane the actress from Diane the person. The press declared romances where there were none. A single look in The Outsiders was enough for tabloids to insist she and Matt Dillon were lovers in real life. The truth, Diane was still learning how to be herself, but Hollywood and the audience watching from afar had already decided who she was supposed to be: a dream girl, a muse, an object of desire. She once said in an interview, her voice quiet but steady, "I play someone's lover on screen. That doesn't mean I love them in real life, but people don't understand that." And that misunderstanding began to take its toll. The more people blurred the lines between Diane and her characters, the more she felt trapped inside an image she didn't fully own. She wasn't being asked to play complex women with flaws and contradictions. She was asked to be the girl over and over again, the perfect love interest, the sweet but fragile partner, the youthful spark that made male heroes shine brighter. For a time, Diane went along with it. After all, she was young and opportunities were everywhere. But deep inside, she felt the growing discomfort of a soul being typecast. Acting was supposed to be about truth. Instead, she was being reduced to a cardboard cutout of what Hollywood thought men wanted. It was dangerous, not because of her career, but because of her spirit. The more she conformed, the less of herself remained. And so, she began to pull back. She turned down roles that recycled the same tired image. She kept her distance from the press, avoided unnecessary interviews, and spoke less about her private life. It wasn't a clever PR tactic. It was survival, because unlike many of her peers, Diane Lane hadn't climbed the Hollywood ladder step by step with managers guiding her choices. She had been thrust into stardom instantly, before she even knew how to navigate the storm, and she had to learn one brutal truth very quickly. Fame doesn't mean you'll be understood. Talent doesn't mean you'll be protected. For Diane, retreating wasn't failure. It was the only way to preserve herself in a world eager to erase the difference between the actress and the woman. But fate wasn't done with her yet. Years later, a single role would drag her back into the spotlight, one that would redefine her career, her identity, and the way Hollywood saw her forever. For nearly 2 decades, Hollywood kept Diane Lane in a box. Beautiful, charming, always someone's girlfriend on screen. But at the dawn of a new century, she was about to shatter that box with one of the boldest choices of her career. In 2002, Diane accepted the role of Connie Sumner in Unfaithful, directed by Adriane Lane. At first glance, the part seemed risky, even dangerous. Connie was not an innocent heroine. She was a wife who betrays her husband, not out of wild passion, but from a quiet, aching emptiness inside what appeared to be a perfect marriage. This wasn't the Hollywood formula of good wife, bad lover. Connie was something far more real, a woman who strayed not because she didn't love, but because she was lonely in her own life. Diane knew the role was going to challenge not only her skills, but also her reputation. At the time, she recalled, Hollywood still divided women into 2 categories, the innocent girl and the adulteress who must be punished. Connie was neither. She was human, and that was terrifying to play. And then came the scene, the one that would define her career. Connie sits on a train after her first act of infidelity. No dialogue, no explicit visuals, just trembling hands, shallow breaths, and eyes that betrayed the war raging inside her. What most don't know is that the scene wasn't scripted. It wasn't rehearsed. Adriane Lane simply told the crew to roll while the cast was traveling back after a take. Diane closed her eyes, let the moment consume her, and the camera captured it in a single take. The result? A silent scene that became one of the most iconic in modern cinema. Viewers swore they had seen something physical, something illicit. But in truth, there was nothing, just pure, raw emotion. On Late Night with Conan O'Brien, Diane laughed when asked about the infamous sex scene on the train. "There wasn't one," she said with a grin, "but people thought there was." That's the power of emotion and the lens. That single performance, subtle, unspoken, but devastating, earned Diane Lane her first Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. Critics hailed her as Hollywood's late-blooming revelation, but for Diane, the awards weren't the real victory. The real triumph was finally being seen for who she was, not just a dream girl, not just a pretty face, but an actress who could embody contradictions, fragility, mistakes, and courage all at once. From that moment forward, Diane Lane was no longer trapped in the image Hollywood had built for her. She had broken free, and audiences were ready to follow her wherever she went next. If Unfaithful revealed Diane Lane as a fearless artist, then Under the Tuscan Sun showed her as something even more powerful, a symbol of rebirth for women everywhere. In 2003, just 1 year after her Oscar-nominated performance, Diane took on the role of Frances Mays, a recently divorced writer who buys a crumbling villa in Italy to rebuild her life. Unlike the fiery, dangerous Connie, Frances wasn't about passion or betrayal. She was about survival, healing, and rediscovering joy after heartbreak. On screen, Diane embodied a woman who was not searching for a man or chasing lost youth. She was simply trying to find herself. And audiences, especially women over 35, saw themselves in her. The film was a quiet story told against the golden backdrop of Tuscany, yet it struck like lightning. Frances wasn't a Hollywood fantasy. She was clumsy, hesitant, lonely, but determined. Diane poured her own lived experiences into the role, the heartbreak, the solitude, the resilience, and in doing so, she gave women around the world permission to feel imperfect and still worthy of happiness. In interviews, Diane admitted that filming in Tuscany wasn't always as idyllic as it looked. "I ate all the pasta, drank all the wine, tried every olive oil, and then I missed my daughter so much I just wanted to fly home. I cried. I didn't want to be in paradise anymore." That confession made her performance even more authentic, because what Frances showed us was simple but profound. Even in paradise, you can feel lost. Under the Tuscan Sun grossed nearly $59 million in the US alone and became one of the year's most successful indie films. But more importantly, it became a cultural touchstone. Women wrote letters saying Frances gave them courage to start over after divorce, to take trips alone, to believe in second chances. For Diane Lane, the role wasn't just another career highlight. It was a declaration. "I don't just play lovers anymore. I play women who survive." And in that survival, she gave audiences a new kind of heroine, one not defined by perfection, but by the quiet bravery of starting again. After Unfaithful and Under the Tuscan Sun, Diane Lane could have easily repeated herself, accepting endless scripts that boxed her into the roles of the sensual woman or the heartbroken divorcee. But Diane had no interest in recycling success. Instead, she gravitated toward characters who lived in the margins of history, women whose strength was quiet, whose pain was hidden, but whose presence carried entire worlds. In A Walk on the Moon, 1999, long before her mainstream resurgence, Diane played Pearl, a young wife adrift in a marriage that no longer reflected who she was. When her husband leaves for work and the endless summer stretches out before her, Pearl drifts into an affair, not out of irresistible passion, but because she no longer recognizes herself. There was no melodrama, no exaggerated climax, just the subtle ache of a woman torn between who she is and who she was expected to be. Diane portrayed Pearl with such fragile honesty that she earned an Independent Spirit Award nomination. Rolling Stone later named the film one of the most underrated indie movies of the 1990s, proof that Diane's finest work wasn't always tied to box office numbers. It was tied to emotional truth. Then, in Secretariat, 2010, Diane stepped into an entirely different world, horse racing. She portrayed Penny Chenery, a middle-aged housewife who unexpectedly inherits her father's failing horse farm. In a male-dominated sport where women rarely had a say, Penny not only stood her ground, she led the legendary horse Secretariat to win the Triple Crown for the first time in 25 years. The role could have easily been played as glamorous or inspirational fluff. Instead, Diane delivered something grounded and deeply human. She carried Penny's determination in her silences, in her controlled grief, in the way she never allowed herself to appear intimidated. Critics praised her for her restrained power, and audiences saw something rare, a middle-aged actress portraying not a lover or a victim, but a leader. With Secretariat, Diane sent a quiet but resounding message to Hollywood. "I don't play girls anymore. I play women who changed the course of history." What made these roles remarkable wasn't their spectacle, but their intimacy. Pearl whispered of private longings. Penny declared strength without shouting. Both carried a truth that only Diane Lane could give because she herself had lived through the loneliness of silence, the sting of underestimation, and the choice to endure without complaint. As Diane Lane matured, her choices grew even bolder. She no longer needed leading roles drenched in spotlight. She sought stories where her very presence could carry quiet gravity. In Trumbo, 2015, she portrayed Cleo Fincher, the steadfast wife of legendary screenwriter Dalton Trumbo during the Hollywood blacklist era. Cleo wasn't the type of character to explode in anger or deliver tearful monologues. Instead, Diane gave her life through subtle gestures, tired eyes that held a family together, silent endurance that spoke louder than any speech. Critics called her the quiet pillar holding up the film's humanity. But Diane wasn't only choosing prestige projects. She also stepped into one of the world's biggest franchises, the DC Extended Universe. As Martha Kent, Superman's adoptive mother, she appeared in Man of Steel, 2013, Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, 2016, and Justice League, 2017. Her role was not built on action sequences or CGI spectacle. Instead, it was one look, one embrace, one line reminding Superman that even gods need grounding. In a universe of capes and explosions, Diane gave the story a soul. She also reunited with Richard Gere in Nights in Rodantha, 2008, a romantic drama that wasn't about young passion, but about second chances between two broken adults. Though critics were divided, audiences responded with devotion. The film grossed nearly $85 million worldwide, proving that love stories, when told with honesty, still resonate. And in Cinema Verite, 2011, Diane embraced television with rare courage. She played Pat Loud, the matriarch of America's first reality TV family. It was a role stripped of glamour, depicting a woman watching her marriage crumble under the eye of cameras. The performance earned Diane nominations for an Emmy, a Golden Globe, and a Screen Actors Guild Award, proof that she could disappear into any medium, any format, and still strike the heart. Even in her later years, Diane never lost her edge. In Let Him Go, 2020, she delivered one of her most haunting performances yet. Playing opposite Kevin Costner, she embodied a grandmother determined to rescue her grandson from danger, even at the cost of violence. Sparse in dialogue, heavy with grief, the film was a ballad of aging love and sorrow. Critics wrote that Diane's performance reminded audiences of a timeless truth. At any age, she could still be the heart of a story. Through these roles, Diane Lane cemented herself, not as a fleeting star, but as something far rarer, an enduring presence. She didn't shout for attention. She didn't cling to youth. Instead, she let her craft evolve with her life, bringing authenticity to every role, from political dramas to superhero blockbusters. She showed the world that an actress's power doesn't fade with time, it deepens. For all the roles Diane Lane played on screen, the story of her personal life was often more complex, more fragile, and more human than anything written in a script. Her first great love story began in Paris, 1984. She met Christopher Lambert, the rising French star of Tarzan. Neither expected romance, but something immediate sparked. What followed felt like a movie of its own. Transatlantic flights, handwritten letters, nights that blurred into dawn. By 1988, they were married. In 1993, their daughter Eleanor Jasmine Lambert was born, the radiant center of Diane's universe. Eleanor would remain her anchor, the one person Diane referred to as her true north. But even deep love could not overcome distance. Diane thrived in Hollywood. Lambert longed for a quiet life in France. The two worlds could not coexist forever. By 1994, they divorced, not with bitterness, but with respect. Unlike most celebrity breakups, there were no tabloid wars, no public accusations, just two people quietly letting go. And perhaps that's why, even decades later, Christopher Lambert's name is the one most people still associate with Diane Lane. Their love may have ended, but its purity lingered in memory. Nearly a decade later, Diane's second marriage began with fireworks, but ended in fractures. In 2004, she wed actor Josh Brolin in a rustic ceremony on a California ranch. At first, it looked like a new beginning, but just 4 months later, police were called to their home. Brolin was arrested for domestic battery after Diane dialed 911. Though she declined to press charges and called it a misunderstanding, the incident left a scar that could never fully heal. The years that followed were turbulent. Bar fights, arrests, paparazzi images of public arguments. In 2013, Diane and Josh divorced, quietly and without drama. Josh later admitted his struggles with addiction and anger, and though he has since expressed remorse, Diane never spoke publicly about their marriage. She chose silence, not because she was weak, but because she didn't need to explain herself to the world. But perhaps the most shocking revelation came not from her marriages, but from her own lips. In 2005, in an interview with Esquire, Diane confessed bluntly, "I had affairs with both Timothy Hutton and Christopher Atkins. No excuses, no justifications, just the truth, spoken with startling honesty." For decades, audiences had placed her on a pedestal as the idealized betrayed wife, the saintly symbol of heartbreak, and here she was, tearing off that mask. The confession stunned Hollywood. Some fans felt betrayed, others admired her courage, but Diane Lane had never been interested in protecting illusions. She wasn't a saint, she wasn't a scandal, she was simply human. "We loved each other very much, but sometimes love isn't enough," she once said of her first marriage. That line could be applied to her entire personal life, full of love, full of mistakes, but never full of regret. In the end, what makes Diane Lane's private life remarkable is not the scandals or the heartbreaks, but the way she carried them, with dignity, restraint, and silence. She never sold her pain to tabloids. She never played the victim. She simply endured, choosing the harder path, to walk forward quietly, even when the world demanded explanations. Diane Lane has never been the kind of star who craved headlines or lived for publicity. She didn't need scandals to stay relevant, nor did she chase trends to keep her name alive. Instead, she built her career brick by brick on something far rarer in Hollywood: authenticity. Audiences don't remember her because she shouted the loudest. They remember her because every time she appeared on screen, she made them believe. She had the uncanny ability to embody women who were fragile yet unbreakable, quiet yet unforgettable. Whether she was Connie in Unfaithful, Frances in Under the Tuscan Sun, or Martha Kent in Man of Steel, Diane's characters felt like reflections of our own lives. Our mother. She may not have an Oscar on her shelf, but she holds something infinitely more enduring: the trust of her audience. One look, one pause, one half smile from Diane Lane could cut deeper than a page of dialogue. In a Hollywood obsessed with noise, she showed the power of outside the screen. Diane has lived just as intentionally. She supports causes quietly, especially those fighting poverty and promoting sustainable living, such as Heifer International, but she never turns her philanthropy into spectacle. Like her acting, it comes from sincerity, not perfo. Now, in her 60s, Diane Lane lives a life far from the chaos of tabloids. She wakes early to practice yoga, rides horses on weekends, tends to her garden, and restores antique furniture by hand. She doesn't chase youth with surgery or endless reinventions. Instead, she embraces aging as a privilege. Ever she once her daughter. Looking back, Diane Lane's journey is not one of easy triumphs or glittering trophies. It is the story of a woman who endured chaos in childhood, who faced betrayal and heartbreak, who stumbled but never lost her essence. She didn't conquer Hollywood by shouting above the noise. She conquered it by refusing, and that may be her greatest legacy: the quiet power of endurance. Because sometimes the strongest people are not the ones who scream their victories, but the ones who survive every fall and rise again, silently, gracefully, on their own terms.